Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today for another webinar in our Market Access and International Approvals webinar series. My name is Kevin and I'm part of the Testing and Certifications technical staff here at Vista Compliance Laboratories. Today we'll be presenting to you the certification and approval regulations as well as the technical requirements for electrical equipment, electronics, and wireless product and device approval in the UK. As an EMC RF compliance test lab and certification body, we focus on wireless and RF device approvals. So today we will be primarily going over the requirements of the UK. This includes Great Britain, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Brexit occurred on the 1st of January 2020 and is the main reason as to why the UK and EU are separate regulatory bodies. So if you aren't aware of what we do at Vista Labs, we are an EMC RF compliance test lab and product certification body, and we are experts in global regulatory approvals for radio frequency devices. So today we will be going over the requirements of radio frequency and telecommunications approvals in the UK. In this webinar, we will provide an overview of the major topics necessary to get your radio devices on the right track for authorization and distribution in the UK. If you have any further questions on the topics presented today or any other immediate questions regarding compliance testing and product certifications, you can reach us at info@vista-compliance.com. So let's begin the presentation. So what is UKCA? UK Conformity Assessed, or UKCA mark, is a declaration by the responsible party that indicates that the product labeled conforms with the applicable requirements for products sold within Great Britain. By affixing the UKCA mark, you take full responsibility for your product's compliance with the requirements of the relevant directives. The UKCA mark is an indication, but not proof, of a product's compliance within the United Kingdom's health, safety, and environmental protection directives and regulation. The UKCA mark on a product indicates to government officials that the product may be legally placed on the market in their country. It also ensures the free movement of product within the UK. And it's required in the following countries of Great Britain, so England, Wales, and Scotland. You are responsible for maintaining the technical documentation, carrying out the testing, and issuing the declaration of conformity as well as the correct labeling of the product. The UKCA mark on a product permits the withdrawal of the non-conforming products by customs and/or enforcement authorities as well. To improve the internal market for goods and strengthen the conditions for placing a wide range of products on the UK market, the new legislative framework was adopted in 2008 by the EU and later revised for the UK. It is a package of measures that aim to improve market surveillance and boost the quality of conformity assessments. It also clarifies the use of the UKCA mark and creates a toolbox of measures for use in product legislation. There are over 20 UKCA directives, but when we talk about UK market access for electrical products, we are talking about compliance with the essential requirements of these directives. UKCA policies that affect electrical and electronic engineering industries cover three major areas. Electromagnetic compatibility, covering all equipment that can generate or be affected by electromagnetic disturbance. Radio equipment, applying to all products using the radio frequency spectrum, and low voltage equipment covering health and safety risks caused by electrical equipment of specific voltage ranges. As a manufacturer, there are other directives you and your suppliers will need to be aware of, such as RoHS, WEEE, and battery directives. But today we will cover these three directives in the electrical and electronic engineering industries that include electrical devices, radio equipment, and telecommunication industries. And some examples are mobile phones, mobile networks, TV sets, power supply units, wireless routers, maritime radars, sensors, and much more. So a little background of EMC. All electric devices influence each other when interconnected or close to each other, such as interference between TV sets, handsets, radios, and nearby washing machines or electrical power lines. The purpose of electromagnetic compatibility, or EMC, is to keep all of those side effects under reasonable control. EMC designates all the existing and future techniques and technologies for reducing disturbance and enhancing immunity. The Electromagnetic Compatibility EMC Directive 2014-30 EU ensures that electrical and electronic equipment does not generate or is not affected by electromagnetic disturbance. EMCD entered into force on the 18th of April 2014 and was to be applicable as of the 20th of April 2016 in the UK, before Brexit occurred. UK products, after Brexit, were allowed to be sold with the applicable directive until 2021, since new legislation was being drafted in place of the EU legislation. But by the end of 2021, all products entering the UK must have a UKCA mark and will not allow to have a CE mark. Under EMC, equipment is categorized as an apparatus or fixed installation. An apparatus is any finished appliance made available on the market as a single functional unit intended for the end user and liable to generate electromagnetic disturbance, or the performance of which is liable to be affected by such a disturbance. And examples of that include computer drives, USB memory sticks, and household appliances. A fixed installation is a particular combination of several types of apparatuses and, where applicable, other devices, which are assembled, installed, and intended to be used permanently at a predefined location. And these are things such as air conditioning units, lighting, and power supply networks as well. So what are the things that are exempted under the EMC directive? The following categories of products are exempted and or not regulated by the EMC. Equipment without electrical and or electronic parts. Explicitly excluded equipment includes things such as radio equipment, which is covered under the Radio Equipment Directive, aeronautical products, and radio equipment intended for use by radio amateurs. Along with that, equipment with characteristics such as not being able to disturb a level allowing radio or telecom devices to operate as intended, and operating without an unacceptable degradation in the presence of electromagnetic disturbance normally consequent under its intended use. Along with that, there's also custom-built evaluation kits for research and development purposes. These are also exempted as well. Along with that, things such as cables, batteries, and corded headphones are exempt as well. And here we have the process of EMC Conformity Assessment. So the general idea is that the manufacturer shall perform an EMC assessment of the apparatus based on the relevant phenomena in order to ensure that they meet the essential requirements. As noted above, the EMC directive does not require the mandatory intervention from a third party, such as a notified body or a laboratory, when carrying out the assessment. The EMC sets out a mandatory essential requirements formulated in a general manner for all equipment, such as an apparatus and fixed installations within its scope. These essential requirements define the results to be attained but do not specify the detailed technical requirements. It also allows adapting the equipment and product design as a result of the technological progress. The appropriate technical solutions to meet the 26 requirements are not imposed as long as the equipment complies with the essential requirements. So moving on to Harmonized Standard, compliance with the applicable Harmonized Standards give presumption of conformity to the essential requirements of the EMC, meaning complying with the applicable Harmonized Standards means conformity with the essential requirements. Applying several standards may be necessary to address all relevant phenomena in all relevant frequency ranges. For multifunction apparatuses, it may be necessary to select standards relevant to primary functions. So when the manufacturer chooses to apply harmonized standards, they shall select them in the following precedence order: product-specific standards, if available, product family standards, if available, and then lastly, if none of those two are available, generic standards. An EMC assessment where no harmonized standards have been applied usually are done when no harmonized standards or where they do not cover all the essential requirements applicable to the apparatus. So moving on to type examination, there will be a review by the notified body, and then in which case a UKCA examination certificate will be issued. Where the declaration of conformity, technical documents shall be prepared by the manufacturer to demonstrate evidence of compliance with the essential requirements. The compliance of apparatus with all relevant essential requirements is declared by a UKCA declaration of conformity issued by the manufacturer based inside or outside the UKCA, the UK, or his authorized representative in the UK. As the DOC is an official declaration of compliance with the legislation, it must be signed by the manufacturer or his or her authorized representative. So moving on with the EMC conformity assessment process. So for the initial EMC assessment, you must meet in all of the possible configurations identified by the manufacturer as representative of its intended use. So with the harmonized standards that are applied, there are many different harmonized standards, but here are a few examples. So we have EN 55032 2012, Electromagnetic Compatibility of Multimedia Equipment Emissions Requirements, and this is for radiated or conducted emissions. And then we also have EN 55024 2010, Information Technology Equipment Immunity Characteristics, Limits and Methods of Measurement, which is radiated/conducted immunity, and burst/surge EFT and ESD. And then for this testing, it will take roughly 1 to 2 weeks, and testing time does depend on the product complexity and will require one testing sample. And for the test reports, this is part of the technical documentation, so these test reports need to be maintained as well. And so moving on with the EMC conformity assessment, these are the things that will be required. So we have the technical documentation, which is the product identification and specifications, the general description of the apparatus, schematics, block diagrams, designs, and descriptions and / explanations as necessary for the understanding of these documents and the operation of the apparatus. Evidence of compliance with harmonized standards, or if they have been applied. A UKCA type examination certificate issued by the notified body, and a UKCA declaration of conformity. So for the UK type examination and certificate, modifications to the approved type that may affect the conformity of the apparatus with the essential requirements of this directive should be communicated to the notified body. And the notified body must review the technical design as it pertains to the relevant essential requirements of the EMC directive and issue a UKCA type examination certificate to the applicant indicating the aspects of the essential requirements that have been assessed. So moving on to the last part of EMC conformity assessment. So the compliance of the apparatus with all relevant essential requirements is declared by the UKCA declaration of conformity issued by the manufacturer that is based inside or outside the UK or his authorized representative in the UK. As the Declaration of Conformity is an official declaration of compliance with the legislation, it must be signed by the manufacturer or his authorized representative. By drawing up the UKCA Declaration of Conformity, the manufacturer shall assume responsibility for the compliance of the apparatus with the requirements laid down in this directive. So in this Declaration of Conformity, you have the apparatus model and product, such as the product, the type, the batch, or the serial number, the name and address of the manufacturer or his authorized representative, a statement that the UKCA Declaration of Conformity is issued under the sole responsibility of the manufacturer, the object of declaration, the statement that the object of the declaration is in conformity with the relevant union harmonized legislation, and the notified body, name, number, and certificate number as well. So moving on to the labeling, the UKCA marking on the product or has to be on the product or packaging, if not feasible on the product. The identification number by type, by batch, or by serial is corresponding to the Declaration of Conformity, and any additional information as well. So what is done about post-market surveillance in the UK? So for surveillance, the Market Surveillance Authority is in Great Britain. Within its areas, the Weight and Measures Authority, and in Northern Ireland as well. And the company must maintain the technical documentation for 10 years. And for the penalties, if you're in England or Wales, if an offense of Regulation 61 occurs, it is 3 months in jail or a fine. In Scotland or Ireland, if an offense of Regulation 61 occurs, it is also 3 months in jail or a fine not exceeding level 5 on the standard scale. If an offense of Regulation 11, 16, 24, or 31 occurs, in Scotland and Northern Ireland, a fine not exceeding level 5 on the standard scale will be issued, and in England or Wales, it will be a fine. So that covers electromagnetic compatibility, or EMC, and we'll be moving on to radio equipment. So a little background on radio equipment. So the Radio Equipment Directive development started in 2007 for the EU. The Radio Equipment Directive 2014-53 EU established a regulatory framework for placing radio equipment on the market. It ensures a single market for radio equipment by setting essential requirements for health and safety, electromagnetic compatibility, and the efficient use of the radio spectrum. It also provides the basis for further regulation governing some additional aspects. These include technical features for the protection of privacy, personal data, and against fraud. Furthermore, additional aspects cover interoperability, access to emergency services, and compliance regarding the combination of radio equipment and software. The RAD was published on the 22nd of May 2014 and entered into the force on the 11th of June 2014 and was applicable as of the 13th of June 2016. This was before Brexit, and because of Brexit, the RAD directive that was just previously mentioned will still be in effect in the UK until 2021 as the UK creates new legislation regarding radio equipment. So here we have the regulated products for radio equipment. So an electrical or electronic product which intentionally emits radio waves for the purpose of radio communication or receives radio waves for the purpose of radio communication. Along with that, an electrical or electronic product which must be completed with an accessory such as an antenna so as to intentionally emit radio waves for the purpose of radio communication, along with receive radio waves for the purpose of radio communication, will also be regulated. And also RF modules, or radio frequency modules, as well as components that have an embedded RF module, will also fit this definition. So here we have the following categories that are radio equipment exempted products. So the following categories include radio equipment which has been placed on the market before the commencement date, equipment listed in Schedule 1, which is radio equipment outside the scope of these regulations, and then radio equipment exclusively used for the activities concerning public security, defense, state security, along with including the economic well-being of the state or the activities of the state in the area of criminal law. So here we have the radio equipment conformity assessment process. So the essential requirements applicable to all radio equipment. So we have the Health and Safety Directive 2014-35 EU. So it is the protection of health and safety of persons and of domestic animals and the protection of property, including the objectives with respect to safety requirements. Then we also have the EMC Directive 2014-30 EU, which is the adequate level of electromagnetic compatibility. And then we also have the Radio Directive 2014-53 EU as well. Along with that, we have the essential requirements applicable to only a certain type of radio equipment pursuant to specific legal acts adopted by the Commission, and this is currently only applicable to radio equipment supporting access to emergency services. Then we have the Harmonized Standards, so it can be either a product-specific Harmonized Standard or a generic Harmonized Standard as well. And if a manufacturer has the intention to apply a Harmonized Standard for the conformity assessment of its products, has to apply in priority the product-specific Harmonized Standard, and only if this one is not available, the generic one, in order to benefit the presumption of conformity with the essential requirements of the Radio Equipment Directive. And then we have Annex 2, Module A, and a manufacturer is required to issue a declaration of conformity when the compliance of radio equipment with the applicable requirements of the Radio Equipment Directive has been demonstrated, and declares it is their sole responsibility through internal production control, and that the radio equipment concerned satisfies the essential requirements. Annex 3 is the conformity to type described in the UK Type Examination Certificate from the notified body review, and declares responsibility through internal production control. And lastly, we have Annex 4, and the notified body is to perform assessments to verify compliance of the quality management system with the requirements. So moving on, we have the Health and Safety Harmonized Standards applied. So we have EN 62479-2010, which is the low power electronic and electrical equipment with the base restrictions related to human exposure to electromagnetic fields, which is between 10 megahertz to 300 gigahertz. We also have EN 62368-1-2014, which is the audio, video, information, and communication technology equipment and safety, which is the safety requirements. And for testing, it will be between 1 to 2 weeks, and this varies, and we will require one test sample. Moving on to the electromagnetic compatibility. So the harmonized standards that would be applied is ETSI EN 301-489-1 version 2.1.1, and then ETSI EN 301 489-17 version 3.1.1. Testing, so that would be around 1 week, but this varies, and then 1 test sample is also required. And here we have the radio conformity assessment process. So the harmonized standards that would be applied is ETSI EN 300 328 version 2.1.1, the wideband transmission system, data transmission equipment operating in 2.4 GHz ISM band, and using the wideband modulation techniques. Harmonized standards cover the essential requirements of Article 3.2 of Directive 2014-53/EU. So for testing, the lead time would be about 1 to 2 weeks, but this varies. 4G cellular devices and base stations can take up to 4 to 6 weeks, and 1 testing sample is required. And so this is the required technical documentation for radio equipment. So we have the product general description, which is the internal and external photos, software and firmware affecting compliance, the user information and installation instructions, a UKCA type examination certificate issued by the notified body, a UKCA declaration of conformity, and a copy of the Declaration of Conformity or Simplified Declaration of Conformity has to accompany each radio equipment. A declaration that the radio equipment has been constructed so that it can operate at least in one member state. And for labeling, the UKCA marking must be on the product or packaging if not feasible to be on the product, and the identification number by type or by batch or by serial according to the Declaration of Conformity. And the label must be a minimum of 5 millimeters, and any additional info needed such as instructions and safety information must also be present as well. So here we have how radio equipment is going to be surveillanced in the UK. So member states are required to take all appropriate measures to ensure that equipment is placed on the market only if it complies with the requirements of the Radio Equipment Directive, and they must maintain the technical documentation for 10 years. So the penalties are determined by the member states, and penalties for non-compliance are proportionate to the infringement and may be increased if the relevant economic operator has previously committed similar infringements. Sanctions are imposed by means of fines, whose sum vary from one member state to the other. This may include criminal sanctions for serious infringements. Non-compliant products are subject to corrective measures, bans, withdrawals, or recalls. So that was an overview of the radio equipment for the UKCA, and we'll be moving on to the low voltage equipment. So here we have the background of the low voltage directive. So the old low voltage directive applied to products placed on the market on or after April 20th, 2016, but not before. And then the new low voltage directive applied as Brexit was occurring. And after Brexit, products that conform to CE regulations were allowed to be sold in the EU or in the UK until new legislation was launched. And as of January 1st, 2022, new products will have to bear the UKCA mark or will not be allowed to be sold in the UK. So So here we have the low voltage regulated products. So the low voltage directive applies to all electrical equipment designed for use with a voltage reading between 50 to 1000 volts for alternating current, and then 75 to 1500 volts for direct current. Voltage ratings refer to the voltage of the electrical input or output and not to the voltages that may appear inside of the equipment. The low voltage directive includes both electrical equipment intended for incorporation into other equipment and equipment intended to be used directly without being incorporated, meaning components are also regulated under the low voltage directive. Along with that, the low voltage directive also covers consumer goods such as electrical appliances, lighting equipment, electric motors and alternators, electrical wiring, appliance couplers and cord sets, electrical installation equipment, cable management systems, and etc. So the following categories of products that are exempted or not regulated by the low voltage directive. So electrical equipment for use in an explosive atmosphere, electrical equipment for radiology and medical purposes, electrical parts for goods and passenger lifts, electricity meters, plugs and socket outlets for domestic use, electric fence controllers, radio electrical interference, specialized electrical equipment for use on ships, aircraft, or railways, which complies with the safety provision drawn up by the international bodies in which the member states participate, and custom-built evaluation kits destined for professionals to be used solely at research and development facilities for such purposes. So here we have the low voltage conformity assessment. So internal production control, the product and quality system assessment procedure is carried out by the manufacturer through its own internal production control. The obligations of the manufacturer are the technical documentation, the declaration of conformity, and the UKCA marking. And there is no conformity assessment procedure in the low voltage directive, which requires the intervention of a notified body. So moving further with the conformity assessment for low voltage, the harmonized standards that are applied, for example, are EN 62368-1 2014, which is the audio, video, information, and communication technology equipment, which replaces EN 60950-1 2006 and EN 60065 2014. So for testing, the lead time is around 1 to 2 weeks, and one test sample is required. So moving on to the last part of the conformity assessment for low voltage. So the technical documentation that is required is the general description of the electrical equipment, conceptual design and manufacturing drawings and schemes of components, subassemblies, circuits, and etc., descriptions and explanations necessary for the understanding of those drawings and schemes and the operation of the equipment, results of the design calculations, examinations carried out, a list of harmonized standards applied, test reports, declaration of conformity, along with also having schematics and a bill of materials as well. So for labeling, the manufacturer shall draw up a written UK declaration of conformity for a product model and keep it together with the technical documentation at the disposal of the National Market Surveillance Authorities for 10 years after the electrical equipment has been placed on the market. The UK Declaration of Conformity shall identify the electrical equipment for which it has been drawn up. A copy of the UK Declaration of Conformity shall be made available to the relevant market surveillance authorities upon request. And lastly, we have the low voltage surveillance. So, if there is sufficient reason to believe that the electrical equipment presents a risk to the health or safety of persons or domestic animals, or to property, authorities shall carry out an evaluation covering the low voltage requirements. The low voltage requires that the manufacturer and others in the supply chain present documents to the market surveillance authorities in the local language of the member states concerned. These technical documentations must be maintained for 10 years. And lastly, for the penalties, if found to be non-compliant, appropriate corrective actions commensurate with the nature of the risk may be prescribed. So, you might need to bring the product, electrical equipment, into compliance, to withdraw it from the market, or to recall it within a reasonable period and commensurate with the nature of the risk as they may prescribe. So this concludes our webinar on UK market access, certifications, and approvals for electrical equipment and wireless products. I hope this webinar was helpful for you in understanding the process for UK approval and certifications, as well as what requirements are applicable to your products. Compliance with the technical requirements of the UK is required for all radio and telecom products to ensure telecommunication network interoperability, avoids interference between telecommunication equipment, ensures public safety, and supports national telecommunication industry, innovation, and engineering. All electrical equipment and devices require approval in the UK prior to distribution or placement on the market. And just to recap about us, Vista Compliance Labs specializes in certifications, approvals, and compliance testing for electrical and radio frequency devices. We are a 17025 accredited EMC RF compliance test lab and 17065 accredited product certification body. We are a telecommunications certification body in the US, Canada, the European Union, the United Kingdom, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Japan. And we provide certification and approvals for all product types in countries all over the world. If you would like to stay in touch with regulatory updates, follow us online. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions on the information presented today or any other general inquiries, you can reach us anytime at info@vista-compliance.com. Thank you for your time and have a wonderful day.